Today, we take up a question that is rarely examined carefully, and that is often treated either polemically or superficially. The question is this: Judaism and Christianity, which of these traditions has developed the more authoritarian structures, both theologically and in practice? This is not about judging people, but about understanding systems. Religious authority is about more than belief. It is about who has the right to define truth, how disagreement is handled, and what happens to those who fall outside the boundaries. Let us begin with Judaism. In Judaism, there is unquestionably authority. Rabbis have authority, the law has authority, and tradition has authority. But this authority is, in its foundational form, not centralized. It is text-based, community-anchored, and dialogical. The Torah is not merely something to obey, it is something to study, debate, and even argue with. A defining feature is how disagreement is treated. In rabbinic literature, opposing views are often preserved side by side. There is no institution that can definitively settle all theological questions for all Jews. Even when practical rulings are made, alternative interpretations remain alive in the texts. This does not mean that Judaism is free of internal authoritarianism. There are clear mechanisms of social control. In classical Jewish tradition, we find kerem, a form of ban or communal ostracism. It was used rarely, but it existed. A well-known example is Spinoza, who was excommunicated from the Jewish community in Amsterdam in the 17th century. However, the limits are crucial. Cherem did not involve imprisonment, torture, or execution. It had no state power behind it. And most importantly, it could only apply within a specific local community. A Jew excluded in one place was not necessarily excluded everywhere. But what about Christianity? Here we encounter a different kind of internal authority. Very early in Christian history, the concept of correct doctrine and false doctrine develops. Disagreement is not primarily treated as a resource, but as a problem. This lays the groundwork for church discipline, measures taken against individuals who deviate theologically or morally. Church discipline took many forms: public rebuke, excommunication, denial of sacraments, or social isolation. Unlike kerem in Judaism, Christian exclusion was often understood as something far more serious, not merely exclusion from a community, but from salvation itself. To be excluded from the church could mean being defined as lost. This gave Christian authority an existential weight that has no direct parallel in Judaism. When Christianity later came into positions of political power, the nature of this authority changed dramatically. Theological disagreement became politically relevant. Church discipline turned into legal prosecution. Heresy was criminalized. Christians persecuted not only external opponents, but their own, other Christians with the wrong beliefs. There is no real parallel to this in Jewish history. Judaism has almost never held the kind of power that would make systematic persecution possible. When strict internal control has existed, it has been local, limited, and without coercive force. This does not mean that Jewish communities have always been open or tolerant. Authoritarian Jewish groups do exist and have existed, particularly in isolated ultra-Orthodox environments. Social pressure and sanctions can be real and painful, but one crucial element is missing: universal authority. No rabbi can define truth for all Jews. No Jewish institution can exclude a person from Judaism as such. One can be a bad Jew, a dissenting Jew, a secular Jew, but one does not cease to be a Jew. In Christianity, this has often been different. Here the issue has not only been how one lives, but what one believes. An incorrect belief has carried severe consequences, especially when the church has held political power. When we compare the two traditions, a clear pattern emerges. Jewish authority is, in its foundational structure, limited, fragmented, and dialogical. Christian authority has, to a far greater extent, been centralized, dogmatic, and exclusionary, both internally and externally. This does not mean that Christians as people are more authoritarian than Jews, nor does it mean that Judaism is immune to abuses of power. But the structures are different. The questions they ask are different. Where Judaism often asks, how can we live this out together, despite disagreement? Christianity has more often asked, who is right and who is wrong? And it is in the answer to that question that authoritarianism is either restrained or allowed to grow. Thank you for listening. If you have nuances, additions, or corrections, you are very welcome to share them in the comments. Such conversations help deepen understanding. Please feel free to share this reflection if you think it may be useful to others. Peace and blessing.